In the wake of World War II, Europe was left in ruins, economically and politically unstable. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was rising as a superpower, its influence spreading across Eastern Europe like an iron curtain. In 1947, Britain and the United States, both exhausted from the war, but determined to prevent another one, began seeking ways to create a stable, collective security system. The idea was simple: build a united front to deter Soviet expansion. This vision culminated in the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty on April 4, 1949, which established NATO. Initially, 12 founding countries, including the United States, Canada, and several Western European nations, formed the core of this defensive alliance. In the early years of NATO, the alliance was primarily focused on countering the Soviet Union's growing influence in Europe. The Cold War, which had already begun to take shape by the late 1940s, was marked by ideological and military tension between the capitalist West, led by the United States, and the communist East, dominated by the USSR. NATO's primary mission was to ensure collective defense against the Soviet threat, based on the principle that an attack on one member would be treated as an attack on all. The alliance grew stronger as the years went on, with Greece and Turkey joining in 1952, followed by West Germany in 1955. NATO's early operations were tested during various crises of the Cold War. One of the most significant early moments came in 1955, when the Soviet Union established the Warsaw Pact, a military alliance of communist nations designed to counter NATO. This set the stage for decades of military tension and political maneuvering. In response, NATO strengthened its military presence in Europe, ensuring that Western Europe remained protected from potential Soviet aggression. The 1960s saw NATO taking more proactive measures, including its involvement in the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. While the alliance was not directly engaged in the confrontation between the US and the Soviet Union, NATO countries, particularly the United States, were prepared to mobilize forces in case of escalation. The crisis was a pivotal moment in demonstrating NATO's role as a deterrent against nuclear war. The heart of the Cold War was defined by the rivalry between NATO and the Warsaw Pact. Both alliances were locked in a game of military posturing, with each side maintaining vast arsenals of nuclear weapons as a deterrent against the other. While direct military confrontation between NATO and the Soviet Union never occurred, proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, and elsewhere became the battlegrounds where both sides flexed their military might. The presence of NATO in Europe ensured that any Soviet advances westward would be met with significant resistance, maintaining a tense but largely stable military balance. By the late 1980s, the Cold War was beginning to thaw. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was a defining moment, signaling the collapse of Soviet power in Eastern Europe. As the Soviet Union began to unravel, many wondered what NATO's role would be in this new world order. For a time, it seemed as though NATO might fade into history, its original purpose no longer relevant. But in an unexpected turn, NATO not only survived the collapse of the Soviet Union, but it also evolved. In the 1990s, NATO pivoted from a defensive military alliance to a more proactive force, focusing on crisis management, peacekeeping, and stabilization missions in regions beyond Europe. The alliance's involvement in the Balkans, particularly the Bosnian, marked a turning point. NATO-led operations in Kosovo and Bosnia helped restore stability to war-torn regions, proving that the alliance could adapt to new security challenges. NATO's expansion also began in the 1990s, with former Eastern Bloc countries and even former Soviet republics seeking membership. Countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined in 1999, signaling a new era for NATO, one where it was no longer just a defensive alliance, but also a force for promoting stability and security across the globe. The attacks on September 11, 2001, changed the world forever. In the aftermath, NATO invoked Article 5 of its treaty for the first time in its history, marking an attack on one member as an attack on all. This led to NATO's involvement in Afghanistan, where the alliance worked alongside US forces to dismantle the Taliban regime and combat terrorism. The mission, however, proved to be far more complex and protracted than anyone had anticipated. NATO's involvement in Afghanistan would last for 2 decades, drawing mixed reactions, but also highlighting the alliance's ability to adapt to modern security threats. In recent years, NATO's relevance has been questioned, with some arguing that its role in a post-Cold War world is outdated. However, NATO remains a critical player in global security. From countering Russian aggression in Ukraine to managing cybersecurity threats and addressing the rise of China, NATO has adapted once again to meet new challenges. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, the alliance's role is more vital than ever in ensuring collective security. From its humble beginnings in the aftermath of World War II to its current role as a global security powerhouse, NATO has remained a constant force in the evolving landscape of world politics. The alliance has faced countless challenges, adapted to shifting threats, and maintained a unity that has prevented global conflicts from spiraling out of control. As new challenges emerge, NATO's ability to evolve and protect its member states will continue to shape the future of global security. The story of NATO is one of resilience, unity, and the pursuit of peace in a world filled with uncertainty. It's a story that reminds us how history, when shaped by the collective will of nations, can change the course of the future. Thank you for watching Footprints of History. If you enjoyed this journey through NATO's history and its impact on the world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more fascinating stories from the past. Until next time, keep exploring the footprints that shaped our world.
existence of NATO is an assurance that each new dawn breaks over our family of nations at peace, over the countryside, cities and homes of a community of peace-loving peoples, over London and Liverpool, Paris and Marseille, New York and San Francisco, Montreal and Vancouver, over Athens, Istanbul, Rome, Lisbon and Reykjavik, over Antwerp, Bonn and Luxembourg. A bond welding the old world and the new. An assurance that 450 million people remain free to live their lives as they wish to live them. To protect and preserve by vigilance and readiness. These are the aims of the Atlantic Alliance. An alliance for peace.
Today on The Big Picture, you have heard the distinguished news analyst Edward R. Murrow tell the story of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The United States, as a founding member of this vital international body, has demonstrated to the world the importance we place on the closest association between the members of the Atlantic community. Now, this is Sergeant Stuart Queen, your host for The Big Picture.
The Big Picture is an official television report for the armed forces and the American people. Produced by the Army Pictorial Center. Presented by the United States Army in cooperation with this station.